Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Now, Tommy said everything I wanted to say, so I suppose I'll just take some cheap shots at a few people. I'd like to start off.
Use the mic.
Can you hear me? You can't hear me. All right.
Yeah.
Don't have a voice that carries. Okay, so I said Tommy said basically what I wanted to say, so I'm just going to spend the time taking some cheap shots at a few people. First of all, I'd like to say that if you're voting in Lembah Pantai, I suggest you vote Nurul Izzah. If you're voting anywhere else, I suggest you vote anyone but the BN. Yes, I'll come back to Haris and Abu in a while. I also like to take this opportunity to say that I think members of the opposition are probably amongst the bravest people in this country for being willing to stand up there and being pilloried and threatened and prosecuted and all the rest of it in a way that I think many of us would not be prepared to do. I'm happy to note that I've seen more people this time around stand up and say, I'm going to be counted, and I include myself in that group. I wasn't prepared to do Charamas the last round, but this time around I think I'm going to do a few, if only to prove to myself that I have some courage. So to my friends in the opposition, I salute you. And of course, when we talk of friendship, we have to remember that Zulkifli Nordin is now officially a friend of the Indians. And we have to salute him as well. And on that point, just last night I sent a tweet up. I said, Najib says he's spoken to a few Indians. No, he didn't say a few. He said, I've spoken to Indians. And they all like Zulkifli Nordin. I've even seen some of them kiss him. So he must be great. So I sent a tweet out. I said, how many Indians has Najib spoken to come to this conclusion? I think one of the funniest I got back, and I'll say it was from Sharad Kutan, was this. He said he spoke to 3. Palanibel, the Swamiji that Rosma consults, and Tun Mahathir. So on that note, where are we right now, state of things? There was an article emailed to me today. It appears on Bloomberg. I think everyone should read it. It's by a writer named William, I'm not sure how to say this, Pesek? Pesek, right. Malaysia needs to get off the road to mediocrity. That's where we are, I think. In simple terms, that's it. I agree with Tommy that Mahathirism has left us in a big, big hole. What we have is a culture of corruption and a climate of fear. But I'm happy to say that looking at the way things have been going since 2008, I think for this we have to give a lot of credit to Badawi, who in his own way opened up the door a little bit, made sure that the radicals didn't come out marching last 2008 when the results came in. And since then we've had some measure of freedom, enough to let people like Tommy Thomas stand up here and insult other upstanding persons in society here. I think that's very good. So, well, we have this Mahathirism and we have it coming back, it seems, on the back of people like Zulkifli Nordin and Ibrahim Ali. But at the same time, we have a bunch of people out there in their 20s who, by some strange twist of circumstance, are the byproduct of Mahathirism. These are young 20-year-olds who suddenly feel invested. I've said in other forums that you have a bunch of Malaysians now, Malay, Chinese, Indian, all of whom speak the same terrible English, who are in the same boat. They can't get jobs anywhere else because they have the same degrees that nobody wants to recognize. And they have the same substandard education that no one wants to give employment to. And they've all got no choice but to start thinking about what they want to do moving forward, which means that they suddenly become responsible voters. And I think we have a shot. Because these are the people, I think, who are going to be defining what happens to us as we move forward. And I think these people have in their hands our future. And I commend them as well, so we may as well add them to the list of people we have to salute tonight. All right? Okay, so now a bit more seriously, where are we? I mean, Tommy's spoken a bit about the rule of law. And I think we need to look at that a little bit more. If I were to say very quickly, does anyone trust the judiciary? I'm sure everyone would say, most of you would say no. Is that right? Yeah, okay. The election commission? Yeah. The police? AG's chambers? MACC? Yeah, so, I mean, we don't have the rule of law anymore. It's quite clear. All right, that's called now rule by law, because as Tommy put it, these are agencies or institutions that are completely, it seems, responsive to executive decree. So what we have, in effect, is rule by decree, it seems. But having said that, we do have, I think, some sections of those constituencies that are beginning to awaken. And we find that they are supporting measures that are being taken, maybe indirectly, showing some inclination towards perhaps releasing themselves from the shackles that they're held by. And I think this is a process that we have to encourage. You know, amongst them are persons from the Malay community. And I'd like to speak about that a little bit. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about what it is that Pakatan is going to do in terms of meritocracy. I think that's great. Obviously, we need to recognize that we can't get anywhere without a meritocratic society. We accept that. However, when you've been told all your life that you're substandard, you are inferior, you've got no shot at anything unless you're given subsidies or you're given a leg up, then this idea of a meritocracy is a very frightening thing. And I think that's something that we also have to understand as we move forward, that we need to be able to help those who really need help, and we shouldn't be clouded by our sense of the history, the wrongs that have been done to us in the name of affirmative action, and ignore that as a potential force in moving forward. We need to recognize that, because that's the same constituency that's driving towards Islamism and radical Islam and political Islam and all the rest of it. All right? So I agree with Tommy when he says that there's been a high degree of politicizing of these institutions that are supposed to be there to keep us on even keel, the checks and balances. I agree with him entirely. And you know, one example I can give you is not too long ago I was doing a case, an election petition for Zaid Ibrahim, right? And this was the Ulu Selangor by-election petition, the election petition. You know, this is the one where Najib first started his "you help me, I help you" thing. And I noticed recently he's done it again. It's on Malaysia Kini TV where he says to someone, you know, let me help you, and then someone says, will you give us a school? He says, you help me, I help you. We're trying to get the name of that person because that's really an electoral offense as far as I'm concerned. All right, but put that aside for a minute. Here we are before the High Court, and we are saying that the Prime Minister actually did say to someone, or to a lot of people in this hall, that if you vote for Kamlanathan, we will build you a school. We will give you a check for 3 million ringgit. So we figured that's enough, right? To go to court and say that's electoral corruption there. So we went to court on that basis. We drafted a petition, and we were quite clever about it because we had witnesses, and we said we're not going to be revealing the names of these witnesses because obviously there'd be witness tampering if we did, as happens in Malaysia. So we go to court, and there you have the UMNO lawyers arguing that the claim was not properly set out. Kamlanathan was embarrassed in law because he didn't know the case he was meeting. The Prime Minister of the country, Najib, in case you were confused, not Rosma, was embarrassed. I mean, I would be embarrassed if, but never mind, that's a different thing. Because he didn't know what the complaint was, and the rest of it. You know, and it was ridiculous. Everyone knew what the complaint was. So there we were, these lawyers citing precedent after precedent from the federal court that says that you must plead with such particularity that one High Court judge has said that the way in which you approach election petitions, which is actually meant to be for the Orang Asli, as the, with no disrespect, meant the lowest common denominator. It takes a rocket scientist now to fill an election petition properly so that it doesn't get struck off. This is the state of the law. This is the state of democracy. So we're in court, and it compels us to then finally say, the reporter who covered this for the Sun is sitting right there, so you know, there are two animals in this court. One is the very large elephant in the middle that no one's actually looking at, the one that has corruption emblazoned across the side, and the ass that the lawyers for UMNO are making the law into in the court. Thank you for the front page quote. Needless to say, we lost the case. Right? So we've got to this situation where the institutions are protecting themselves. So much so that you begin to wonder, how on earth do we exist? We have no right to complain about anything. If we do, we're immediately fearful that we might face reprisal, either at work, because we work for a GLC, or we might not get work because the GLC gives us work as lawyers, or etc., etc., etc. That's the climate we exist in. So some are now saying, what's wrong with that? And I ask, do we really need to say that? Do we really need to ask what's wrong with that? Why have we accepted that this is an acceptable state of affairs? And I think that's the central question for this election. Right? People are saying, do we really want to rock the boat? Do we really want to jump into the uncertainty of the Pakatan Rakyat? Honestly, I don't think very much of some of them. I think very highly of a lot of them. But I can't say for sure that they're going to live up to all the promises that they're making at this point in time. They're politicians, just like the politicians on the other side. However, I do know that this lot on this side are prepared to give us certain concessions. They're prepared to say, for example, that they will introduce the IPCMC to ensure that no one dies any longer in custody. There will not be any deaths in custody, or at least if there are, the people who are responsible for that will be brought to account. We're being told that the anti-democratic legislation, the Printing Presses Act, all the other legislation that is used, the OSA, and so on and so forth, all of these will slowly be repealed as part of a move towards reforming democracy in this country. And I figure if we can get at least that much from this government, then when we think that they're useless, and they're clinging on to power in a way that we don't like, when we march, we will march in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, to get rid of that lot. But we'll know for sure that none of us are going to be having to visit anybody else in Kamunting, or anywhere else that they'll put detainees without trial after that. And I figure if we can at least get that much from this government, we're already that much more ahead than where we are right now. Because the truth of it is, there's not going to be any easy recovery from where we are right now. The system is in a state of utter disrepair. The education system needs a complete overhaul. We know that. The health system needs a complete overhaul. We know that as well. So for all of these reasons, people are saying, surprisingly, that perhaps we should just leave it the way it is. And I'm not too sure about that, because it might work for some of us or all of us in this room, but it's not working for most of the people out there. And that's a problem. We're complaining about spiraling crime rates. We're not asking why. We're complaining about other social ills. We're not asking why. We blame it on the government. That's true. It's their fault. They're not taking enough measures. They're not addressing the root causes. But what are those root causes? One of the things that we've been working on, I'm with HAKAM, the National Human Rights Society, and we've been collaborating with Saya Anak Bangsa Malaysia over the last 2 years to promote something that we're calling the Social Inclusion Initiative. All right. What is that? Essentially, it's the establishment by statute of a parliamentary commission that will oversee spending on any measures aimed at poverty eradication. So we'll know exactly what's being spent and how it's being spent, and we'll make sure that that money is getting to where it's supposed to be getting. All right? Why do we think this is essential? We think it's essential because it's a great way to address racial inequalities. It's a great way to address the race issue, the religious issue, to make sure that people feel that they are included rather than excluded from a process whereby their welfare is going to be looked out for. All right? Why have we come to this point where we think we need to do this? Let me tell you this. Until about 3 months ago, when the poverty rate suddenly dropped to 1.3%, it stood at the terrifying level of 3.8%. 3.8% is calculated by this government on the basis of 763 ringgit for a family of 5 on the Peninsula Malaysia. 763 ringgit for a family of 5 on 8 indicators. All right, I can't remember all 8 at the moment, but they'll include things like healthcare, education, housing, food, clothing, recreation, and so on and so forth. So according to our government, if you earn 764 ringgit, you're not poor. Family of 5. And I'm not making this up. Okay, we went through some lengths to get this information, which apparently is OSA. But we got it. All right? Now, if you apply a figure of 1,200 to 1,500 ringgit, that figure jumps to about 38%. Now, let's look at the brim figure of 3,000 ringgit, and we're into the high 60s. So basically, according to the government, which has been handing out money to people who earn, families who earn 3,000 or less, 68% of this country or about there is poor. We're talking about hardcore poverty. Enough for the government to say we need to help you. Why else would they be giving out money, right? So if that's correct, then we have to ask ourselves what sort of generational problems this is creating. And I tell you, it's terrible. The generational cycle of poverty on the ground is mind-boggling. In East Malaysia, we know what the issues are, as well as Peninsular Malaysia, we know what the issues there are as well. And it might come as a surprise to some, it doesn't come as a surprise to me. Poverty does not recognize racial boundaries. Everyone's in the same boat. The percentages are about the same, other than the Orang Asal and the Orang Asli, who are obviously the biggest component of this scheme of things. All right. So when you look at that, and then you ask yourself why people are being stabbed in Bukit Gasing, etc., etc., the answers aren't too difficult. People are being pushed into a corner where they feel they need to react or respond. And the reason that's happening is because we have a government that doesn't seem too concerned about that, as long as they can carry on with the deficit spending that is bankrupting the country and making that sort of problems even more difficult for us to deal with as we move forward. And that is the reality of where we stand. So in all of that, I ask you, does it really matter if Anwar Ibrahim is corrupt? I don't think so. I'm saying that not because I don't care about corruption, I do. But I'm saying that because what they are saying to us is that they are prepared to present issues, or at least address those issues in a different way. And mind you, having regard to the fact that the kind of people who are standing up and stumping, people who have gone to jail. I was watching, alright, because it was meant to tear jerk, so I did cry a bit, I admit. There's this really interesting video, sort of like a conversation between Mat Sabu and Guan Eng. It's on YouTube.